"We want to wean off of FEMA," declared President Donald Trump in a dramatic, attention-grabbing tone, and those words immediately sent political shockwaves through newsrooms and state capitals across the country. Could the White House really be turning its back on a federal system that had long been the backbone of disaster relief for countless communities? Today, we dive deep into this unfolding story of a controversial plan to scale back the Federal Emergency Management Agency, unravel the tangled relationships between federal and state governments, and find out how these proposed reforms might shake the very foundations of crisis response in the United States. In this episode, we will dissect the central question. If the federal government dramatically reduces or even eliminates FEMA's role after the hurricane season of 2025, what does that really mean for states, local communities, and the countless families who depend on swift support after storms, tornadoes, or wildfires? We will also ask why President Trump's administration is so strongly committed to placing renewed responsibilities on governors and state agencies. Plus, we will examine the staggering costs of disaster relief and discover how the ongoing debate about national versus local control is generating a whirlwind of concern among experts, lawmakers, and citizens alike. Coming up, we will explore the deeper layers of this complex issue, why certain experts fear states could be crushed by the mounting financial burden of future hurricanes, floods, and forest fires, how supporters of Trump's plan argue that local leaders inherently know best how to respond to local problems, and whether or not any plan to dismantle FEMA can truly succeed without the approval of Congress. Along the way, we will shine a spotlight on the shocking number of FEMA employees who have left the agency in the past few months, investigate the reasons behind delayed approvals of disaster declarations, and reveal how some states might be forced to choose between rebuilding after disasters or slashing other vital programs that their citizens rely on every day. But first, let us take a step back and see how we arrived here. FEMA, short for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, was established in the late 1970s, eventually evolving into the modern operation that coordinates massive recovery efforts for all kinds of disasters, from hurricanes to earthquakes and more. Over the decades, FEMA has been retooled, reformed, and repurposed by different administrations, each trying to address new challenges and find new strategies for disaster relief. Now, the Trump administration is intent on moving away from a model it views as overly reliant on federal resources. President Trump's statement was clear. He wants to redirect funds directly to impacted areas rather than funneling them through a large bureaucracy, essentially cutting out the middleman and shrinking the overall budget for disaster response. Yet this bold vision raises a critical question. Who will genuinely step in to fill the gaps when a catastrophic event strikes? Former FEMA Chief of Staff Michael Cohen, who served under the Obama and Biden administrations, has raised major concerns that phasing out FEMA would leave dangerous voids in federal disaster oversight. He warns that states simply do not have the built-in personnel and financial reserves to handle the spiking number of climate disasters on their own, even if governors do have a central role in coordinating immediate response efforts. And Cohen is not alone in this view. Many experts worry that this pivot to state-led disaster management could intensify severe regional disparities. States with deeper pockets might be able to fund robust disaster response teams, while smaller, financially strapped states facing successive hurricanes or other crises could buckle under the weight of steep costs. Meanwhile, we also have to factor in the intangible. What if multiple large-scale disasters occur simultaneously, stretching both state and federal resources thin? Some analyses show that, by changing the threshold for declaring major disasters, the burden of billions of dollars in recovery funds could be thrust onto the shoulders of local communities, which would be devastating in the wake of a city-level catastrophe. Think about it. If a major hurricane tears through a Gulf state, or if a wildfire scorches thousands of acres of a dry region, significant amounts of money are required to replace infrastructure, rebuild homes, salvage businesses, and potentially relocate families from dangerous floodplains. States already rely on federal matching funds that can run into the tens of billions of dollars. If you remove or drastically reduce that financial lifeline, are states willing and able to raise taxes or reallocate money from other essential services and social programs? The Trump administration, through Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, insists that states can build mutual assistance pacts with one another. They propose that local governments can step up, forging new partnerships independent of large federal oversight. The idea is that governors could create networks of support across state lines, banding together to send supplies or specialized personnel wherever they are needed most. On paper, this is hardly a new concept. There is, in fact, a national mutual aid framework called the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, which has been around for some time. The big question is whether these efforts can truly replace the scale that FEMA can offer. As critics point out, these interstate agreements have typically counted on the federal government to reimburse or supplement extraordinary costs. Strip away that reimbursement structure, and states might be left to foot the entire bill. We must also look closely at how the Trump administration has already changed the day-to-day operations at FEMA. By some accounts, more than 2,000 full-time staff have either left or been let go in recent months. That is a jaw-dropping proportion of a workforce that is supposed to be on the front lines of relief when storms strike. Not only does such a large reduction raise questions about who will provide direct assistance to hurricane survivors or wildfire victims, but it leaves a real possibility that states will endure longer wait times for critical help. Indeed, officials from several hurricane-prone states say they experienced wait times of up to 8 weeks for approval on their disaster declaration requests earlier this year. That is 2 months of anxious uncertainty, potential property damage, and unaddressed humanitarian needs, long enough to deepen despair for survivors struggling to rebuild. If you find this prospect of dismantling or radically scaling back a long-standing federal institution as eye-opening as it sounds, this is a perfect moment to let us know you want more in-depth coverage of stories impacting hundreds of thousands of people. Show some support and appreciation if you believe these issues matter. You never know which state might be next to face the full force of the next major storm. Back to the heart of the issue. It is impossible to overlook the legislative side. The Stafford Act of 1988 outlines precisely how FEMA is supposed to function. If the Trump administration wants to revise the percentage of cost sharing between the federal government and the states, or even to eliminate FEMA entirely, it must gain congressional approval. That amounts to a colossal policy battle in the making, as not everyone in Congress is eager to shift enormous financial burdens to state governments, especially with climate change amplifying the number and severity of disasters. Many lawmakers are loath to be seen as turning their backs on their constituents who will inevitably need help, particularly during hurricane season. Yet President Trump has proven himself adept at mustering loyal allies in Congress. So, the outcome is far from certain. Will lawmakers hamper the plan, or could they push it through after enough political maneuvering? Making sense of the administration's rationale, President Trump markets this plan as a more direct path to disaster relief. Instead of funneling resources through FEMA, the money might come straight from the White House or from the Department of Homeland Security, though that remains unclear. Trump states he wants to hand out less money, but also suggests that states handle disaster events from start to finish. Meanwhile, critics interpret the plan as a radical deconstruction of the safety net that helps states bounce back from catastrophic events. Lives, livelihoods, and entire regional economies hang in the balance. Sarah McTarnahan, an analyst from the Urban Institute, points out that raising the bar for what qualifies as a major disaster could have shifted roughly $41 billion in public assistance costs from the federal level to states over a recent span of years. That is no small sum, especially for regions already grappling with budget crises or limited tax bases. The lingering question is whether Americans trust their state leaders to pull off large-scale rebuilding projects, especially if they happen more frequently. Let us not overlook the political dimension behind all of this. In announcing his plan from the Oval Office, Trump shared his frustration with what he views as overreach and inefficiency in government agencies. He boldly declared, "If a governor cannot handle it, maybe they should not be governor." These remarks challenge the conventional wisdom that certain crises simply exceed local capacities. Hurricanes can wipe out entire ports, disrupt power for weeks, and threaten thousands of homes. Floods can tear through vital farmland, leading to food shortages. With FEMA no longer in the same position to provide resources or logistical support, will neighboring states reliably step in? And will they be able to do so at scale, especially if the disaster in question is region-wide or repeated at short intervals? This interplay of local, state, and federal politics leads to an essential puzzle. How do we decode the rhetorical posturing from genuine policy proposals that might reshape the very core of disaster management in the United States? We should also consider the reality of legislative inertia. FEMA has been reauthorized, retooled, and renewed under many presidents, some more enthusiastic about the agency than others. It has developed specialized programs to help individuals file for assistance, provide low-interest loans, and collaborate with small businesses. Critics argue that dismantling such programs without a fully fleshed-out alternative is reckless. Supporters of the White House plan see it differently. They believe states will push for more efficient responses once they know that the federal government will not be there to bail them out. They also say that the money, freed from FEMA's bureaucracy, could appear with fewer strings attached, letting governors target local priorities more effectively. Whether that would happen in practice remains uncertain. Imagine a particularly fierce hurricane season rolling in after 2025. Multiple storms slam the Gulf Coast, with torrential rains and devastating winds destroying homes from Florida to Texas. Under the new arrangement, each state's governor might have to request essential resources directly from the White House, or else rely on mutual aid compacts with neighboring states. But if those neighboring states are also impacted by a region-wide storm system, they might be too strained to offer meaningful help. And if the White House is overseeing direct relief distribution, how quickly and effectively can it act without the established network that FEMA has developed over decades? One might also wonder how easy it could be for politics to color decisions about which communities get the swiftest, largest allotments of federal relief funds. Could certain localities be left waiting too long if they do not align well with the current administration's priorities? A separate concern arises from the cost of rebuilding. Hurricanes and floods erode roads, tear down public buildings, upend entire neighborhoods, and can require far-reaching reconstruction efforts. States that already have limited tax revenue might struggle to fund those projects if federal support diminishes. This is where it gets personal. It is not just about government red tape. It is about parents trying to put food on the table, families stranded without electricity or clean water for extended periods, or local businesses that might never recover from a single catastrophic storm. The consequences become deeply human, raising moral and ethical questions. Do we want to risk a system in which citizens in wealthier states receive better emergency services, while those in poorer states are left waiting for local officials to conjure up the funds on their own? The swirling debate continues to intensify, amplified by alarming data about climate change. According to multiple scientific analyses, storms are likely to become more frequent and more intense in the coming years. Combine that with the threat of wildfires and the ongoing worry about rising sea levels, and you have a potent mixture of emergencies that can test any government's capacity. Yet President Trump's plan continues to resonate with those who believe that the federal government should not be so deeply involved in what they see as state-level responsibilities. Are these people misguided zealots, or do they have a point about the inefficiencies that plague some large federal bureaucracies? If you are intrigued by this drama, a real clash between powerful federal agencies and assertive states, with entire communities on the line, give us a show of support and stay tuned for even more stories that pull back the curtain on monumental policy shifts. Your engagement sends a message that these complexities deserve a spotlight, and it encourages further exploration of what might happen if FEMA truly fades away. In summation, there is no denying the magnitude of President Trump's proposed transformation. Dismantling or severely curtailing a 46-year-old institution like FEMA is not a minor administrative tweak. It is a seismic shift that challenges the balance of power between Washington and the states. Questions abound regarding legal frameworks, budgetary constraints, the readiness of local governments, and the potential risk to American lives when the next superstorm crashes onto our shores or another region is engulfed in flames. The White House vision underscores a growing movement that wants to see responsibility placed squarely in the hands of state authorities. But the real test is whether states are prepared or can prepare fast enough to safeguard their residents if the federal safety net is truly scaled back. FEMA's supporters argue that, although local authorities indeed drive the initial disaster response, the critical bulwark provided by large-scale federal coordination and financing cannot be replaced overnight. The agency's defenders say you cannot simply pivot to direct funding from the Oval Office, because the intricate machinery to distribute aid, track damage, and guide states through complex logistical problems has evolved over decades. They caution that removing this infrastructure abruptly might be as disastrous as a hurricane itself, leaving people more vulnerable and potentially turning natural disasters into profound crises. And as emergency managers work tirelessly to plan for the next big hurricane season, the sense of uncertainty and urgency grows each day. One thing is clear: the national conversation about FEMA has taken a decisive turn. No matter which side ultimately prevails, large-scale changes to disaster relief appear closer than many ever anticipated, just a few short years ago. The future of FEMA, the well-being of countless Americans during times of crisis, and the equilibrium between states and Washington all hang in a delicate balance. This story is not only about an agency's fate, it is about people, resources, and resilience in an era when extreme weather remains an ever-present threat. Thank you for joining us in navigating this complicated and potentially history-making shift in how the United States responds to disasters. With so many open questions, so many concerns, and so much at stake, this issue is bound to remain in the headlines for a long time. Keep the conversation going, share your thoughts, and stay alert. After all, the next big storm or catastrophic wildfire might be just around the corner, and if FEMA is no longer playing its traditional role, America's disaster preparedness may never look the same again.